Alright, so before we begin, I just gotta ask, what's with the red button? I know that a lot of people claim that I'm paranoid about communism, but what's with the red button? Senator McCarthy is gonna rise from his grave and smack the red off of that lapel. Watch it be like some sort of a AIDS awareness thing, and I'm a big insensitive prick. Well, wouldn't be anything new. Alright, here we go.
They want to work and don't want a handout, but a hand up. Not only do we need new blood in Washington, we need a new way of thinking in Washington. As a physician, I was taught first, do no harm, to think before you act, to analyze the unintended consequences of your actions. I think America would be better off if all of our politicians took the same approach. First, do no harm. It's self-evident that the President and Congress are unable to do what every family in America must do, balance their budget. If Congress can...
Dagnabbit. Did anybody catch where we were at? I blame, what's his name? Who's that guy from Apple? Steve Jobs. I blame Steve Jobs for that. Never liked the Flash. Oh, where were we? 228.
of thinking in Washington. As a physician, I was evident that the President and Congress are unable to do what every family in America must do, balance their budget.
Okay, a couple things that he said to this point. The whole thing about doing no harm, I really agree with that. I respect Rand's occupation previous to this. I know that Ron Paul had gotten criticisms a while back. I know it's maybe unfair to compare him to his dad, but he'd gotten criticized a while back for, what can a doctor possibly know about economics? But as I began researching it and really looking into it, I found out, it's quite a bit, and one thing doesn't necessarily limit you from understanding of another. But the point that Paul's making here is the whole aspect of not doing any harm, treating the country not as some sort of a pincushion experiment, but treating it with the respect that it deserves if you're going to be a leader. Also mentioned is the balancing of the budget. Now, I've heard many arguments over the past couple of years on YouTube in the little quote unquote financial community where some people claim that there's different levels of finance. So one economy is somehow isolated from another. High finance doesn't necessarily have to do with like personal finance and so on and so forth. But the thing that I see is that when you're talking about government spending, you literally are talking, I think, more about household finance as it comes to products, goods, and services that the government purchases. It's really not something that is excluded from its effects on the economy. Heck, even politicians talk about how they can use that sort of, the stimulus that comes from infrastructure repair and things like that. So obviously they even admit that it affects it. Now, can the debt of a nation be paid off quicker than household? Yes. Do they have more resources? Absolutely. I mean, it's not exclusive to just one income. All types of things can be shifted and changed. And there's also another part of it that if you talk about sovereign debt, like one nation's debt to another, when you're trying to conduct some sort of a fiscal program, well then it's unfair to look at that debt and say, look at this problem. So uh, I guess what I'm trying to say is that when it comes to budgetary spending of products and services, yes, by all means, it needs to be respected in the budget, and you need to have people in office that respect that money as if it were their own instead of how we see many government people where they could really care less. It's free money.
Congress cannot or will not balance the budget, then we should amend the Constitution to make it mandatory. President Obama is on course to add more to our national debt than all previous presidents combined. We borrow $1 million a minute. Our $18 trillion debt has become an anchor.
Wait a minute. He's on course to add more to our national debt than any president before? So that means he hasn't done it yet? Coming up on 6 years with all the crap that he's done? There's been somebody worse? I bet it was FDR.
Economists argue that the burden of debt costs us 1 million jobs a year. I fear that this enormous burden of debt threatens our currency. I fear that another 2008 style panic is possible, and I fear that this degree of debt is an imminent threat to our national security. You cannot project power from bankruptcy court. It does not make us appear stronger when we borrow money from China and send it to countries that burn our flag. The hollowing out of our national defense comes from the advocates for unlimited spending and perpetual military intervention. Secretary Gates got it right when he said that we've over-militarized our foreign policy. Should we be engaged in trying to encourage stability in the world? Absolutely. But we must think before we act. We must remember the maxim, first, do no harm. Hillary's
Man, I'm digging this guy. Just gotta say it.
Libya is a prime example of acting without thinking. Libya is now a jihadist wonderland. Jihadists swim in our embassy pool. Our ambassador is dead, and we are now more at risk from terrorist attacks than ever before. Unfortunately, both parties too often seek military intervention without thinking through the possible unintended consequences. Many Republicans only complain that we didn't send U.S. ground troops or we didn't stay long enough. The Middle East lives in the midst of a 1,000-year war between Sunni and Shia. Superimposed on the long war is a century-old war pitting a barbaric aberration of Islam against a civilized Islam. We are foolish to believe that we will solve this puzzle. We must defend ourselves and defend vital American interest, but we must not be deluded into believing that we can remake the Middle East in an image of Western democracy. At home, much of the nation still suffers. Dr. Martin Luther King spoke of two Americas. He described them as two starkly different American experiences that exist side by side. In one America, people experience the opportunity of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in all its dimensions. But in another America, people experience daily ugliness that dashes hope and leaves only the fatigue of despair. Although I was born into the America that experiences and believes in opportunity, my trips to Ferguson, Detroit, Atlanta, and Chicago have revealed what I call an undercurrent of unease.
One thing I want to point out here real quick, I dig a lot of what he said about his approach to militarism and his cautious approach to military and aggression. I really dig that. The two America thing, just like Dr. Paul, I was probably born into the America of opportunity. Well, I'm not going to say probably. I was born into this other America of opportunity. You know, I wasn't born in the ghetto. But at the risk of not checking my privilege, there are people who leave the ghetto, who transcend where they've come from. And my thought is to look at how those people did it or ask them what they think. Now, in some cases, these people are like, I've got mine, so you just got to pull up your bootstraps and get yours. So that's not really a very, very fair argument to make against the two Americas. Are we, much like the Middle East conflict, are we somehow going to delude ourselves into thinking that we can abolish this class structure that has existed since the beginning of civilized society, as long as this Middle East conflict that he's talking about. Should in America we have strife like places of Ferguson and Oakland and places that are really, really in a rough shape? I don't know. I think we have to look at them as a something that's malfunctioning, to be sure. And I don't mean any disrespect to people who live there, but you it's not supposed to be a jungle. It's supposed to be a community that's healthy. And I don't see those communities as being very healthy when they're in the position of destroying themselves. Now, if it's because they have a feeling of being betrayed by their government representatives, their leaders, then I can understand that. But damn, you want to talk about betrayal of your leaders? What's with like Jesse Jackson coming to the situation like after the fact and only inciting more violence or pointing out even more disparity? I don't know. I don't know if that's the solution.
There is a tension that has become visible in the protests in every American city. As Congressman John Lewis put it, there is growing discontent in this country.
All right, we're going to leave it at that for this morning. Growing discontent in this country. So we're at 6:26. Somebody remind me of that. I appreciate everybody watching, and we'll have more of this soon.